Hello, my name's Hojong Shim, and I'm doing my Gapminder assignment on South Africa and Great Britain. So let's start off with the historical context. British colonization of South Africa commenced in 1652 at the Cape. Its original purpose was to regulate trade routes passing through that region, but soon the powerful European nation realized the potential to develop the Cape for their own benefits. The colonization of South Africa by the British led to the rise of slavery and forced labor systems, which changed the lives of native tribes permanently. Communities transformed within decades, and the lands of South Africa altered into a chaotic and oppressed place for the production and extraction of raw materials for their mother colony, Great Britain. The patterns of national development in the two countries explain this pivotal event of colonization in the midst of European industrial expansion. So first, let's talk about the total GDP, or gross domestic product. The total gross domestic product is an indicator for all goods and services provided by the nation within its borders over a specific period of time. For the growth trend of the total GDP in the UK and South Africa, it can be observed that the UK has had a higher starting point and that their economy has been constantly growing, while South Africa had a lower starting point and their population has expanded, but their economy has stayed relatively the same in comparison to the large growth that the UK has experienced. The UK experienced drastic increases in their GDP over the past 20 to 30 years, while in South Africa, there were minuscule changes in their GDP development. In South Africa, only changes in the population size can be seen, and not the economy. South Africa continued to base their economy mostly off of mineral production and a bit of tourism towards the future, while the UK developed a very diverse economy consisting of the export of cars, petroleum, computers, gold, and etc. South Africa's highest GDP rate was in 2011, as it was 416.6 billion US dollars, and its lowest was in 1960, which was 7.36 billion US dollars. This shows that South Africa progressed immensely after achieving their independence, therefore, colonization can be seen to have a negative effect on South Africa's development. Number 2. The number of people in poverty. The total number of people in poverty shows the number of people who live under the minimum wage cut line. The number of people in poverty were very similar between the UK and South Africa. The data shows that there was a slightly higher rate of people in poverty for South Africa, but it can be seen that the statistic has been mitigated over the past few years. However, we must not forget that the population of the UK is around 10 million more than that of South Africa, so the ratio of people in poverty compared to those who are not will be higher in South Africa. In fact, nearly half of the population is in poverty, as almost 22 million South Africans live under the poverty line. The data has been recorded after the independence of South Africa, which was in 1931, and it's fascinating how much South Africa has recovered from the after effects of European domination, considering how similar their poverty line is compared to their former colonizer, Great Britain. Today, the effects of globalization has had many benevolent impacts on numerous nations, but in South Africa it has been rather harmful because the liberalized and globalized economy of the country permits foreign workers to come into the country and take up job spots. There have been government-initiated programs to aid the jobless, such as the EPWP, or Expanded Public Works Program, but as a compensation for the downsizing of Social Security, the program still lacks qualified and educated workers for their jobs. Number 3. The number of child deaths. The total number of children who died under the age of 1. It can be seen that South Africa has had a longer period of time where child death was less frequent than in the UK, and the point where the two countries diverge most can be seen around the 1800s. However, Britain starts to mitigate the number of child deaths starting from the 1900s and eventually surpasses South Africa in that statistic. This data was interesting since I expected a lot more child deaths from South Africa during the 1800s, since they were being colonized by Britain, meaning their living conditions were impoverished due to the harsh treatment that they received from the British colonists, therefore leading to more deaths of infants at childbirth under the age of 1. Additionally, it can be seen that South Africa's population starts to grow cumulatively, yet infant mortality rates increase. This trend of the population growing, yet having no drastic increase in the development of the country, and can be seen in other data sets such as the total GDP, number of people out of primary school, and even the number of people in poverty. Ever since the democratization of South Africa, more than 4,000 health clinics have been instituted, and government health services have been made free for children under the age of 5. Additionally, a national food fortification program helped mitigate the number of child deaths as well, since malnutrition is one of the major factors of this cause. Number 4. Children out of primary school. The number of children who did not attend primary school. For this statistic, it can be seen that Britain's number of children out of primary school has remained very constant since the 1970s, but this rate has changed significantly in South Africa. In 1970, South Africa had a higher rate of children out of primary school than England, but as time passed and the country became more developed, the field of academics has expanded over time and eventually caught up with the British by the 2000s. Education in South Africa is governed by two major foundations called the General Education Training, or the GET, and the Further Education Training, or FET. The GET includes grades consisting of 0 to 9, and the FET includes 10 to 12. That's a bit similar to the American education system, since schooling levels are arranged by grades starting from 1 to 12, except while American levels are called elementary, middle, and high school, in South Africa they are called foundation phase, intermediate phase, and senior phase. The government has tried to include as many children as possible in schools, as in 1996 they issued a policy where it says that children who have parents who earn 10 times less than the annual school fee are legally exempt from some or all school tuition. In Britain, education is considered mandatory for children between the age of 5 and 18 by law. In addition, state schools in Britain are free of charge. Therefore, the British education system grants more accessibility for its citizens as it is enforced by law and it is totally free. So, lastly, did the development of the countries affect the governmental and political stability of the nations? The development of both South Africa and the UK has definitely had an impact on their government and politics, because the way that a country is structured, such as its economy, education system, and healthcare system, and so on, all require a governing body that is well adapted to their build. For example, in the children out of primary school section, we can see that the UK and South Africa have different systems of accepting children from certain social classes because of the economic system. Elements of a country such as education and economy all go hand in hand, therefore are related, which means that the government needs to adjust to these circumstances and must have the capability to work with these conditions to craft a system that would work out best in certain countries, just as South Africa did with their education policy to provide as much accessibility to kids living in impoverished conditions. Everything is connected to the government, so yes, of course, the interrelation between various characteristics of a country affects its political stability. Thank you for listening.